Some of the first impacts of the global pandemic were experienced at the community level, when grocery shelves were empty, people lost their jobs, and individuals with COVID were required to quarantine in their homes for several weeks. Communities quickly saw an increase in food insecurity. The pandemic not only generated new incidences of food insecurity, but magnified the plight of people who've been historically marginalized from equitable food access.
Long after the pandemic's most adverse effects, there are still lingering consequences to our food supply. The most concerning are those that result in people going hungry. It's a fixable problem if we commit ourselves to solving it, and that's why in making this series, we had a few clear objectives. To determine the effects the COVID-19 pandemic had on local, regional, and global food systems through an analysis of the food system in the western southern tier of New York State. To help you better understand and appreciate how our food systems work, and recognize how much more reliable and eco-friendly local food systems are for us as consumers. To shine a light on some of the issues that our farmers, distributors, and advocates face on a daily basis at every stage of the food system. And to issue a call to action by encouraging you to make a few new choices that will positively impact the local food system, your health, the environment, and ultimately your own bottom line. And not to be too presumptuous, but I think we've managed to check all those boxes. So now that we are nearing the end of our journey through the food system in the western southern tier of New York State, let's have one last visit with local farmer and farmers market manager, Stephanie Benning.
I'm Stephanie Benning, and I'm the manager of the Olean Area Farmers Market, and I've been doing that for 6 years now. But I was involved with the market previously as both a vendor employee for farms and then later as a volunteer to get the SNAP program up and running. So it was, I think, pretty new working with the Farmers Market Federation of New York at that time to do that program. And we've never stopped doing it since. We added the Double Up program into it maybe around 2015, 2016. So now we participate in that to match the SNAP dollars up to $20 for additional fruit and veggie tokens. That program gets more food to more people. It frees up people's income to spend at other vendors and gets more money allocated toward our local farmers. So I love it. And that's what we need more than anything, is enough support for farms that farmers markets can continue to exist. Because farmers markets depend on having enough of a variety to get people to want to come. And when farms are disappearing, I forget what the number is, I just saw on Agrarian Trust the other day, like 37 farms a day or something like that. There's not enough variety, even for the solid vendors that are there, to make the customers want to keep coming every week. And as soon as that starts, it's a slippery slope from there. So we're really fortunate in Olean to have had the city to help us secure getting funding for this building. It's really a special building, and I can't imagine a better way to get food to people in an urban area and give them the opportunity to see each other and socialize and meet the farmers all at once and get the freshest stuff possible. I mean, I think it's a lifeline for a community. I'm such a big picture thinker, and it's hard sometimes for me to stay focused on just what the farmers market has to do, because I want to do everything. I want to have citywide composting in Olean. I want to be going out and picking it up. And so I have to keep my vision focused when I'm working for the farmers market, because I easily want to be doing everything. I'm the proudest of the fact that we are vendor run. I think that's rare and special, and it gives the vendors the opportunity to really have a voice in things that affect them. And I love that. The food system, the fact that we can even say that is the problem, and which connects to thinking too globally in terms of it. But every region needs a food system, one that makes sense for it. And helping farms to have a network together where they can access multiple markets is a really positive way to build a local food system that works for us.
Up until this point, we spent the majority of our time calling attention to issues affecting our food system that were either amplified by the pandemic or have been around for so long that they've become par for the course, instead of receiving the urgent attention they so desperately need. But let's bring it all together so that we can leave with a good understanding of where we're at and what we should be striving towards. The push to move away from the global food system has merit. You see, while there are many, especially in lesser developed countries, who tout the benefits of globalization because it has opened up trade, created jobs, and even helped to alleviate food insecurity, the truth is the cost far outweighs the benefits. The global food system is responsible for contributing an enormous amount of greenhouse gas emissions to the global warming we are now experiencing. Too much of our land is being used to grow food in unsustainable ways and is having a dreadful effect on the environment. The irony is that large-scale agriculture is not only a significant contributor to climate change, but also a victim. Crop loss due to climate change creates huge disruption. And as the pandemic proved, disruptions to the global food supply chain can have catastrophic repercussions for all who depend on it. So really, it's just common sense. If everyone depends on one system and it fails, then everyone suffers. But if we all depend on our regional system, then failing systems can't affect everyone. Globalization also increases the cost of inputs and forces the price of commodities to unsustainable levels for local farmers, who can't produce enough to compete with larger farms, and usually don't have access to global markets. Then there's water, the lifeblood of this planet, and without which we will all cease to exist within a few days. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, on average, agriculture accounts for nearly 70% of the world's freshwater withdrawals. By 2057, when the population is expected to reach 10 billion, that will need to increase by approximately 15%. The fact is that the global market encourages the overproduction of food to stimulate economic growth, which in turn puts a strain on freshwater supplies. Another consequence of globalization is the rise of chain stores and supermarkets that source their goods from far and wide, and for the most part don't benefit local economies. When domestic policies are made, they tend to ignore the health of the consumer, the farmer, and the vitality of local economies. They are geared toward profit-minded, corporate agribusinesses who can afford to lobby for what they want. The list of problems with the global food system is too long to explore fully in this series. But you've heard enough to know that the problems are real and demand urgent attention. But let's talk about our local and regional systems, because therein lies the answer to many of our food supply needs. A lot of credit must go to the pantries and food banks who provided emergency food services during the pandemic and played a significant role in mitigating the increase in food insecurity, and in remembering the tragic 2022 hate crime that took place in Buffalo, New York, and forced the temporary closure of the only supermarket in that area. It was the local food bank and food pantries, not some global entity, that came to the rescue to prevent a low food access crisis. It's the people who are close to us that will be the first to lend a helping hand, and local food systems are just that, communities of people helping each other. You've repeatedly heard that localized food primarily benefit local economies. So we need to return to investing in and building or rebuilding local and regional food systems. When food systems are strengthened at a regional level, they tend to operate somewhat independently of the larger global system. So what then are some of the things we can do to strengthen the food system in the western southern tier of New York State that might also apply to local food systems everywhere? Well, here are some ideas. The Farm Bill was and remains a good idea. It is currently being improved so that it can better support small farms and local food systems. If it continues to evolve in consideration of an ever-changing economy and ecology, then we are on a good trajectory. Of course, our nation's antitrust laws can also help make our food system more resilient and equitable if we can get back to enforcing them. They will authorize the government to break up corporations that monopolize markets and restrain trade. Approximately 17% of the region's 250,000 people live in poverty, which greatly impacts their ability to have access to not only their minimum daily food requirements, but also the quality of food needed for good health indicators. A continuation of and additional support for the programs that are making a real difference in the southern tier will help to increase food access and reduce food insecurity. The truth is, our biggest problem when it comes to food insecurity and food waste is over. It's true. Most of the food loss and waste occurs at the consumption phase, and that is a direct result of the overs. Let me walk you through it. We overproduce food, overpurchase groceries, overstock our fridges, overfill our plates, and overlook those in need. And wouldn't you know it, the overproduction of food is because of a false flag, not a real need. Companies overmarket to influence impulse shopping, and that is construed as market demand, when the true need is from people who can't afford to buy healthy food. If we could separate binge demand from real need, we will actually be able to put a significant dent in food insecurity while producing less. Farm workers in New York State, including the H-2A workers mentioned earlier in this series, all have mixed feelings about the new work-week threshold instituted by the New York Farm Laborers Wage Board. The new threshold requires farmers to pay farm workers overtime after 60 hours, which they plan to bring down to 40 hours by 2032. But according to farmers we interviewed, farm work is not like other occupations and shouldn't be treated as such. They claim that this is a burden that their already thin profit margins cannot survive. They're also convinced that if H-2A workers can't get enough work hours in New York State because farmers can't afford to pay the overtime, they will be left with no choice but to go to another state. So some New York State farmers are of the opinion that if this is what policymakers endorse, then the playing field should be leveled by having all surrounding states follow the same rules, and this must be done at a federal level. Of course, farms and supporting businesses should have an adequately compensated workforce no matter what. And while legislation has been put in place to reimburse farmers for some of the wage increases, the best way to avoid overburdening taxpayers would be by strengthening our local and regional food systems so that our farmers can be profitable enough to be self-sufficient. Obviously, there wouldn't be a problem with aging farmers if there were younger farmers coming up who could replace them. And as we mentioned before, this is why creating pathways for emerging farmers to be able to secure available and affordable land and infrastructure is critical. But so too are succession plans. And while succession plans can range from developing employee-run co-ops like the Aber suggested, to selling or contracting the farm to non-family members, most farmers consider their farm their legacy and would like nothing more than to pass it down to the next generation.
My name's Layla Mankaman. I'm 17 years old. I'm about to be 18. And I had an internship at Rise of Swine, and I learned a lot in the last year. I actually just graduated high school. I finished the last couple years homeschooled, so I was able to kind of use my job here as a motivation to be a part of something way more rewarding than I ever thought it would be. I do all the daily chores, that is moving all the animals and feeding them and watering them and any other projects that need to be done around the farm. Not a lot of people realize the work that goes into the food that goes onto their plate. They just don't know about it, really. I think one main problem is that so many people rely on things like supermarkets, and when people rely on things like supermarkets, they're relying on huge manufacturing farms. And if they were to do things like shop locally, that would help out all of the local farmers rather than the big manufacturing facilities. My favorite thing on this farm is probably split between two things. Well, other than my amazing bosses. That one mama sow that loves her belly rubs, that'll just flop over like a puppy dog, or a couple of our breeding cows, Clarabelle and Babybelle, and Walter the bull. Oh my gosh, they're such babies to me. For me, my job is amazing. I mean, I provide clean, healthy food for families. And I do plan on staying in the local farming industry. I don't know where exactly I'll go, but I'm very happy where I am right now at Rising Swine. A little over a year ago, I never would have thought I'd be doing something like this, but it just kind of fell into my lap, and right now I'm just seeing where it takes me.
With an average of 12,235 farms being lost annually in the U.S. since 2010, we need to do more to attract younger farmers and also to ease the burden for those who inherit farms from their families.
Capital gains, I think, is a big factor if farms have to change hands, especially if they're being inherited. And if it's a smaller farm, I think it's less of an issue. So it doesn't really pertain to us per se. But on the larger farms, if they have to pay capital gains on the full assessed value, it's almost prohibitive.
We have a farm. We raise Black Angus beef cows and pigs, and it's pretty cool to have like locally raised meat. You know, they're not no growth hormones. You know where they're coming from. No antibiotics. Our herd is very small. The pastures that they're on are massive, so you know that they have like a good quality of life, and I think that that's so important.
Consumer demand for locally sourced meat, dairy products, and processed food items remains strong. This is the conundrum. Strong demand, but inconsistent and low supply of local food, especially meat. Bottlenecks and inefficiencies in the processing element has meant that local output hasn't met local demand. The fix for this problem seems like a no-brainer. Legislation should allow for more USDA processing facilities by investing in community-scale processing establishments located near the farming areas. But many roads lead back to issues like climate change and food waste, so while we're on the topic of meat processing, it would be prudent to mention that raising livestock for meat consumption generates as much greenhouse gas emissions as all the automobiles in the world combined. So we also have an obligation to the environment when we think about livestock. And while meat is a very important source of nutrition, and also has cultural significance for people all around the world, the consumption of meat has increased exponentially over the last 50 years. And this is not only bad for the environment, but also increases the risk of heart disease, cancer, and obesity. Cutting back on meat consumption would go a long way in reducing carbon emissions and is also healthier for everyone. And since food waste was mentioned, here's another good idea that will make for more responsible meat consumption. We need to encourage more whole animal buyers, such as restaurants and institutions, that will use the entire animal, which reduces waste and, in many cases, the need for USDA slaughter. We all share in the responsibility for getting to this point, and therefore the onus is on all of us to correct our course for the sake of the next generation. Livestock farmers are simply trying to keep up with market demand, and unfortunately there are consequences to rapid mass production of most commodities. Those consequences underscore the many benefits of strengthening local and regional food systems, especially investing in farms embodying regenerative practices that improve the land. There are many problems that can't be fixed by simply throwing money at them. But fortunately, aging infrastructure is not one of those problems. Local and regional food systems can benefit tremendously from good roadways, aggregation and food distribution centers, efficient vehicles, appropriate cold and frozen storage. The list is quite extensive, but certainly attainable. And infrastructure benefits everyone, not just the agri-industry. Our findings as we presented them suggest that the pandemic did indeed affect the global food system the most. But that doesn't mean that the local and regional systems didn't also take a hit. It's just that they proved to be considerably more resilient. So in conclusion, it would be safe to say that the push to reinvigorate and return to local systems is our most viable option in our quest for sustainability. There is a trending effort to view food as a basic human right, almost like a public utility, and that access to basic food for good human health should be provided to all people. And it all starts with a conversation. We hope that you enjoyed this series and that it will help guide you towards better choices in the future. So thank you for joining us, and welcome to the conversation.
I will be the last to fall.
I'm a farmer. I'm not gonna quit being a farmer until the Lord decides to take us up there.
I won't shed a tear for them to see.
This is where I find my happiness.
I won't have your name to call.
Did I talk long enough? Now that you made me cry.
I will be the last to fall.
Challenges just make us stronger as long as we keep our focus in the right place.
The best crop of Sunny Cove Farm are the children that we've raised there.
I'm here for the duration of it, and probably even farther than that, because I will probably be put somewhere on this farm when it's all done and over with. I will still be here on the farm somewhere.
It's really amazing.
Well, welcome to our food system.
Our goal here is just to bring that fresh local produce to the community and really emphasize that it's local. It's local, and there's so much power in that.